Daniel's boots echoed softly in the long, empty hallway of the abandoned research station. The metal walls were scarred with burn marks and broken lights flickered above him. The place had been left floating in orbit around a dead planet, forgotten by most, but Daniel had come searching for salvage. He expected rust, old machinery, and maybe some useful tech to take back home. What he did not expect was the faint sound of breathing behind a locked steel door. At first, he thought it was his imagination. He stood still, listening carefully. The station had been quiet for hours, the only sound the humming of his own life support suit. But the noise came again, soft and weak, like someone trying to hold on. Curiosity pulled him closer. He forced the door open with a crowbar, the metal shrieking as it bent. Inside, dim blue lights revealed a small cell. Behind thick bars, a figure crouched on the floor. Daniel froze. The figure was not human. She was taller than him, though thin and fragile from hunger. Her skin carried a faint glow, as if tiny stars lived under the surface. Her eyes shone a pale silver, bright even in the dark cell. Her long hair was tangled and her arms shook as she tried to lift herself. Daniel recognized her instantly from old reports. She was one of them, the alien race that had been called dangerous, destructive, and impossible to trust. The files from the station's scientists had named her a monster, but Daniel did not see a monster. He saw someone who looked weak, scared, and very close to death. He tapped on his wrist console, searching through the station logs. The words filled his visor screen. Subject remains uncooperative. No signs of rational speech. Recommended starvation until compliance. Dangerous ability suspected. Daniel's jaw tightened. He scrolled further. Do not feed. Do not release. Subject cannot be trusted. The words repeated again and again, written like commands. He looked back at her. She had not moved closer. Instead, she pressed herself against the corner, her glowing eyes fixed on him with both fear and hope. Her lips parted, and he saw how dry they were. She looked as if she had not eaten in weeks. For a long moment, Daniel stood frozen, his mind caught between duty and conscience. Every record said she was a threat. Every scientist who had worked here had treated her like a dangerous animal. But Daniel was not like them. He believed that fear often blinded people from truth. He stepped closer to the bars. Can you understand me? He asked softly. The alien woman tilted her head. She did not answer, but her eyes followed his movements carefully. Daniel slowly reached into his pack. He had an emergency food ration, a small sealed packet with enough energy to last a day. It was not much, but it could keep her alive. He hesitated, thinking of the warnings again. Do not feed. Do not release. If the reports were right, she could be dangerous. If the reports were wrong, she was dying unfairly. Her hand lifted slowly, thin fingers trembling as she stretched them toward him. She did not lunge, did not attack, she only reached, like someone begging for mercy. That was when Daniel made his choice. He tore open the packet, split the bar in half, and carefully slid it through the bars. For a moment she only stared, as if she could not believe it. Then with sudden speed she snatched the food and stuffed it into her mouth. She ate as if she had not tasted anything for days, tears forming in her glowing eyes. Daniel watched in silence, his heart heavy. This was no monster. This was a prisoner. When she finished, she held the wrapper close to her chest, almost as if it were a treasure. Then slowly she looked back at him. For the first time, he saw a spark of life in her eyes. Not anger, not violence, just gratitude. Daniel sat down on the cold floor outside the bars. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. They called you dangerous, he said quietly. But I think they were wrong. The alien woman tilted her head again. She seemed to be listening. He knew he had crossed a line. Feeding her was forbidden. If the station's automated systems were still active, they might have already recorded his actions. But Daniel did not regret it. Something inside him told him this was right. The station groaned around them, metal shifting as old systems tried to power up. Daniel ignored it, his eyes locked on the glowing figure before him. He wondered who she was before she was captured. Did she have a name? A family? A world? She reached out again, her hand sliding through the narrow gap between the bars. Daniel hesitated, then slowly extended his own hand. Her fingers brushed against his, and a strange warmth spread through his skin. It was unlike anything he had ever felt, like holding living light. She did not hurt him. She did not try to escape. She only held his hand, weak but steady, as if telling him without words, "Thank you." Daniel felt a knot tighten in his chest. The galaxy had called her kind monsters. The scientists had written her off as dangerous. But in that moment, Daniel saw the truth. She was no enemy. She was someone who needed help, and now he was the only one who could give it. As the lights flickered above them, Daniel whispered to himself, "This changes everything." Daniel could not sleep that night. He set up his camp inside the abandoned research station, using a corner room as his base. The silence pressed heavily on him, broken only by the faint humming of old generators. His thoughts kept circling back to the alien woman locked in the cell. Her silver eyes, the glow of her skin, the way her hand had trembled when it touched his, all of it stayed in his mind. The next morning he gathered what little food he had left. He was not a wealthy traveler. His ship was small, and he had come here to salvage parts to sell. But he still had enough rations to last him several days. He stared at the packets in his hand, then made his choice. He took one and walked back to the cell. The alien woman was waiting. She sat near the bars, her glowing eyes fixed on the hallway as if she had known he would return. When she saw him, she stood, her weak body swaying slightly but stronger than the night before. Daniel smiled softly. "You remember me," he said, though he knew she probably did not understand his words. He tore open the packet and passed the food through the bars. This time she did not grab it with desperate speed. She took it carefully, her long fingers brushing against his hand. She ate slowly, her eyes never leaving him. Something in her gaze made Daniel feel she was studying him, learning from every move he made. After finishing, she made a soft sound. It was not a word, but a melodic hum that rose and fell like music. Daniel blinked, realizing she was trying to communicate. He placed a hand on his chest. "Daniel," he said clearly, pointing at himself. The woman tilted her head, then touched her own chest. Her lips moved, and a faint sound came. "Sa-ra." It was broken, uncertain, but it sounded like a name. Daniel's heart leapt. She had a name. She was not just subject or monster, she was Sarah. He repeated it gently. "Sarah." Her eyes lit up and she nodded. A small smile touched her lips, the first he had seen. For the first time, she looked less like a prisoner and more like a person. Days passed, and Daniel continued to bring her food. With each meal, she grew stronger. The glow in her skin brightened, her hair regained its shine, and her voice became clearer. She began to repeat his words, slowly learning fragments of English. "Food," she said one day, pointing at the packet. "Yes." Daniel nodded, smiling. "Food." She repeated it again, then looked at him. "Daniel." Hearing his name in her voice made his chest tighten with emotion. She was learning. She was alive again because of him. One evening, after he had given her food, she pressed her hand against the bars. Daniel placed his hand against hers. This time she did not just touch him. She held his hand firmly, her glowing skin warm against his. Her eyes softened and she whispered his name again. "Daniel." Then, before he could react, she leaned forward and pressed her lips gently against his hand. It was a simple gesture, but Daniel felt its meaning. Gratitude, trust, maybe even affection. His heart pounded, but he did not pull away. He let her lips rest there for a moment, then she released him and looked down shyly. Daniel whispered, "You're no monster, Sarah." But danger was close that night. As Daniel checked the station systems, a red light flashed across his console. The automated security system had reactivated. The old program had detected unauthorized interaction with subject. The screen filled with warnings. Containment breach protocol initiated. Security drones online. Daniel cursed under his breath. He ran back to the cell. Sarah looked at him with wide eyes, sensing something was wrong. The lights flickered and the sound of heavy metal footsteps echoed down the hall. 2 drones rolled into view, their weapons glowing. Their voices spoke in cold, mechanical tones. "Unauthorized human contact detected. Prepare for containment." Sarah stepped back, fear flashing across her face. Daniel grabbed his tool belt and pulled out a small blaster. It was not meant for fighting drones, but it was all he had. He stood in front of her cell, shielding her with his body. The drones aimed. Daniel fired first. His shot sparked against the metal shells, barely slowing them. One drone fired back, the blast scorching the wall near his head. Sarah pressed against the bars, her glowing hands trembling. She made a sharp sound, almost like a command. Light began to spread across her body, brighter and brighter until Daniel had to squint. Then, with a sudden burst, the light exploded outward. The drones sparked violently, their systems frying as if struck by lightning. They collapsed to the floor, smoke rising from their shells. Daniel stared in shock. Sarah was breathing hard, her body still glowing with faint energy. She had destroyed the drones without touching them. Now Daniel understood why the scientists had feared her. Her people had power, real power, enough to burn circuits and bend steel. But she had not harmed him. She had saved him. He turned to her, eyes wide. You could have killed me too. But you didn't. Sarah stepped forward, pressing her hand against the bars again. Daniel, she whispered, her voice trembling but filled with meaning. Daniel placed his hand over hers, his fear fading. He realized the truth. Her power was not meant to harm, it was meant to protect. And now she had chosen to protect him. But the danger was far from over. If the drones had activated, then the station had already sent a signal to the fleet outside. Soon humans would come to reclaim their monster. Daniel knew what that meant. Chains, starvation, and experiments all over again. He looked at Sarah, her glowing eyes filled with trust. He knew he could not let that happen. Don't worry, he said firmly, though his heart was heavy with fear. I'll get you out of here. Sarah's lips parted and she whispered a word he did not expect. Free. Daniel's chest tightened. She understood. She wanted freedom, and now it was his mission to give it to her. Daniel stood in the dim corridor, breathing hard, the smoke from the destroyed drones curling into the air. The red alarm lights flashed, painting the walls with warning signals. He knew the station had already sent its message. A fleet would come. Humanity would not ignore the chance to reclaim their dangerous subject. He turned to Sarah. She stood close to the bars, her body glowing faintly after the release of her energy. Her silver eyes searched his face, fear and hope mixed within them. Daniel stepped closer, placing his hand gently against hers. They'll be here soon, he said softly. If they find you, they'll lock you away again. I can't let that happen. Sarah pressed her hand harder against his, whispering one word, shaky but clear. Free. The sound of that word hit Daniel like a blade and a promise at the same time. He nodded. Yes, free. He pulled out his tools, working quickly on the lock of the cell. Sparks flew as he cut through the old mechanisms. The bars screeched, the door swung open, and for the first time in who knew how many years, Sarah stepped out. She wavered on her feet, unsteady but proud, her glow shining brighter in the open space. Daniel guided her carefully, his hand on her arm. Come on, we need to reach my ship. They moved quickly through the twisting halls of the station. Daniel's heart pounded with every step, expecting more drones. But the path stayed clear, as if the station itself was too damaged to stop them. Still, the alarm screamed and the walls pulsed with red warning lights. At last, they reached the docking bay. His small ship sat waiting, old but reliable, patched from years of work. Daniel helped Sarah climb aboard, her glowing form almost filling the cramped cabin with light. He sat in the pilot's seat and began powering up the engines. The controls lit one by one, humming as the systems woke. Sarah sat beside him, her eyes wide as she studied the ship. She reached out, brushing her fingers along the dashboard, curious and gentle. But before they could take off, a shadow fell across the window. Daniel looked up, and his heart sank. The human fleet had arrived. Several large ships floated outside the station, their sleek designs shining against the black of space. Their weapons glowed faintly, aimed at the small docking bay. A voice crackled through the comms, cold and commanding. This is Captain Rhodes of the human fleet. You are harboring an unauthorized subject. Hand her over immediately and no harm will come to you. Daniel gritted his teeth. He glanced at Sarah. She stared at the ships, her body trembling, her glow dimming with fear. She whispered, "No, no," shaking her head like a child afraid of the dark. Daniel turned on the comms, his voice firm. She's not a monster. She's alive and she trusts me. I will not hand her over. There was silence for a moment, then the captain's voice returned, sharper now. Pilot, you are defying direct orders. That creature is dangerous. Stand down or we will force you. Daniel felt the weight of his choice pressing on his chest. If he obeyed, Sarah would return to chains and starvation. If he resisted, he might not survive. But when he looked at her, her eyes filled with fear yet still glowing with trust, he knew what he had to do. He tightened his grip on the controls. "Then you'll have to go through me." The fleet moved closer, their weapons charging. Daniel launched his ship from the docking bay, engines roaring as he pushed the throttle forward. The small vessel shot into space, weaving between the giant warships like a bird flying among predators. Lasers flashed, streaking past them. Daniel pulled hard on the controls, dodging left and right. The ship shook with every near hit. "Hold on," he shouted, though he knew Sarah could not understand everything. She leaned forward, placing her glowing hands against the ship's console. Suddenly, the lights inside the cabin brightened. The engines roared louder, stronger. Daniel stared in surprise. Her energy was feeding into the ship, boosting its systems. "You're helping me," he whispered, amazement flooding his voice. The ship moved faster than ever, slipping through the gaps between the larger vessels. The fleet fired again, but each shot missed narrowly, as if the ship itself had gained new life. Sarah's glow spread across the cabin, wrapping them both in light. The fleet's comms crackled again. "Last warning, pilot. Stop this madness. That thing is not worth your life." Daniel's reply came with steady certainty. "She's not a thing. She's someone. And as long as I breathe, I won't let you hurt her." The fleet began to form a blockade, ships surrounding Daniel's small vessel. There was no clear way out. Sarah's glow dimmed, her strength fading from the effort of powering the ship. Daniel's heart raced. They were trapped. Then Sarah turned to him. She placed her hand gently against his chest, her silver eyes shining with trust. "Daniel, safe." Before he could respond, her body glowed brighter than ever before. Light filled the cabin, pouring outward into the vacuum of space. A wave of energy burst from her, sweeping across the blockade. The human ships flickered, their systems failing one by one. Engines died, weapons powered down, and silence filled the comms. When the light faded, the fleet drifted powerless, their ships frozen in space. Daniel's vessel, however, still flew strong, carried by Sarah's energy. Daniel looked at her in awe. She was breathing hard, exhausted but alive. She had used her power not to destroy but to disable. She had saved them both. He reached for her hand. You didn't kill them. You spared them." Sarah smiled weakly, her voice soft but clear. "Human. Kind." Daniel's throat tightened. In that moment, he realized what made humanity special. Not their ships, not their weapons, not their power. It was the choice to see beyond fear, to offer kindness even when the galaxy demanded suspicion. Sarah leaned close, her forehead touching his. "Daniel, free." He held her gently, his heart full. The galaxy might still call her dangerous, but to him, she was proof of something greater. That trust could bloom even between species once divided by fear. As their ship drifted into the stars, Daniel knew this was only the beginning. One act of kindness had changed everything. A human and an alien woman, once strangers, were now bound together by trust and hope. And their story would echo across the stars, a reminder to all, humanity's greatest strength was not power or fear, it was compassion.